Hey everybody, today I wanted to show you how I made this Outfeed assembly table for my shop with this MFT style top with all these dog holes in it and some aluminum extruded rails so that I can attach different jigs and fixtures to the assembly table. And stick around at the end of the video where I'll talk about how you can also make one of these too for your shop.
So I started building the base cabinet for the Outfeed table by first cutting down some plywood into more manageable pieces using my track saw. Then I used the table saw to rip the base cabinet parts down to their final width. I'm using my MFT table and track saw to cross-cut the base cabinet parts to their final length, but a cross-cut sled at the table saw would also work just fine. After getting all the cabinet pieces cut to their size, I drilled pocket holes in all the parts that will be used to assemble the cabinet later on. Sometimes I find it hard to align cabinet parts when you're assembling with pocket holes, so here I'm just adding a few dominoes to help with that alignment while I put the cabinet together. Here you can see me using those dominoes for alignment while I screw the cabinet parts together. This cabinet has an MDF top, so I just put it on my table saw as a flat reference surface while I assembled the base cabinet. For pieces like this, what I ended up doing is putting down some glue and shooting in some brad nails to hold it in place while I drove in pocket screws from the other side. At this point, the cabinet was getting a little too tall for me to work on while it was on the table saw, so I moved it down to the ground to finish adding the last few pieces. After the main construction of the cabinet was done, I added some leveling feet so that later on I could level it easily with the top of my table saw. And here's the cabinet pretty much finished. On top of it you can see the pieces there that I'll be using to make the MFT style top. For the MFT top, I ended up ordering some 2" by 1" T-slot from McMaster, and for the two long rails I ordered 4-foot sections. For the two short rails I ordered some 3-foot sections, and then as a cross member I ordered a 1" by 1" 3-foot section. I used the 3D printer to print out some of these corner brackets that will be used to hold the T-slot together. They have some grooves in the bottom that fit into the grooves of the T-slot, and then also 4 screw holes to secure them to the T-slot. I also printed 2 of these brackets to support the 1" by 1" T-slot that's used as a cross member. Here I'm just sliding in these T-slot nuts that I ordered off McMaster that will be used to secure the brackets to the T-slot. So I'm going to add the cross member bracket in first, and I ended up using a clamp to pull that groove that was printed into the groove on the T-slot to get a nice friction fit before I tightened up the screws. Then I just did the same thing on all the corner brackets as well. Alright, so now I got all the brackets secured with the T-slot bolts and pretty happy with how this turned out. Now I just need to add some support brackets on the inside of the T-slot rails in order to hold up the MDF top. After cutting the MDF top to the right size, I routed out a chamfer along all the top edges. Then I sanded the top smooth to prepare it for finish. I thought it would be easier to add finish before I drilled all the holes, so here I'm just adding several coats of this Danish oil to try and harden up the MDF a little bit. Alright, so my first attempt to make the grid of dog holes on the top of the MDF top was using this kind of weird cobbled together 3D printed jig that I made, and it worked okay, but the grid holes weren't perfectly aligned, and so I just decided in the end to draw some lines on the MDF top with a straight edge and a pencil and drill them out by hand, because it was going to be just as accurate as it was using this jig that I tried to make. In theory, this jig should have worked just fine, but some of the dog holes started getting loose after drilling through them a couple times, and so since there was too much slop, the holes ended up being not as perfectly square as I wanted. And so here you can see me just how I ended up just drawing lines across the table and in a grid pattern. After I drilled the lines, I just drilled through with my Forstner bit. This process generated a lot of dust and wood chips, so here I'm using what my wife has deemed the scream extractor just to clean everything up. Alright, so with all that done, I was pretty close to finishing, so I decided to add some solid wood edge banding at this point. I'm just using glue and brad nails to hold these together. So I'm going to use these smaller strips of MDF as the support brackets on the inside of the T-slot rails to hold up the MDF top. So I drilled some holes and then I elongated out the holes just using my bandsaw. The center support was pretty straightforward. I just drilled some holes and attached it using those T-slot bolts. Next, I moved on to attaching the inside support rails for the MDF top, and I'm using some hex bolts here that go into those same T-slot nuts. And I used elongated holes so that I could align everything a 1/4 inch from the top of the T-slot. So at this point I just needed to secure the MDF top to the T-slot rails. So I mark out some hole locations for some bolts that will go through the top and through a hole that was printed into the corner brackets to secure it down. The smaller hole here is for the bolt to actually go through, and the larger hole is just to recess the top of the bolt head. Here I'm just using a nut to secure the bolt from the underside. Now I'm just attaching the whole assembly to the workbench using these screws. After I lightly sanded down the top to remove the grid lines that were there from before, I was ready for the last step of this project, which was just to add some paste wax to give this thing one last layer of protection.
Alright, so I finished the build on this assembly table, and this is a few weeks later, so I'm going to walk around and show you some of the features that I've built into the base cabinet on the assembly table here. Alright, so in the front here I put some drawers, and these just hold some of my tools. So I'm a little OCD on tool storage, as you can probably see. But just a few different tools, and I use some Kaizen foam to kind of cut out some spots for the tools here. And then underneath I just have like a mechanics tool set. And then this dust port here actually runs through the assembly table and comes out the other side through a port back there. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see. And then that runs into my table saw. And you probably notice my miter saw hiding behind here. Yeah, I don't really use miter saws a lot because mine is super dusty, and yeah, I have other ways to make crosscuts. So anyway, also I just have some storage here, some chargers for drills and stuff. It's kind of a nasty corner, but I'll work on fixing that up a little bit later. And then on the other side, again, I just put some shelves. So I bought some drawer slides that are down here, and I'll probably, I don't know, in the future maybe I'll put some drawers on the sides. Alright, so those are some of the features I put into the base cabinet, but obviously you can totally customize it, make shelves or drawers or even some doors, and just use it for a lot of good storage. So I've been using this Outfeed table for probably about a month now, and I've loved having it. The Outfeed table I had before had some T-track in it, and it worked okay, but a lot of times I'd get like glue or epoxy stuck in the T-tracks, and then I couldn't use them. So I really like the dog hole design. If I get some glue on it, it should come off. It has paste wax on the top, but if I did get glue on it or in the dog holes or anything like that, I could just sand it down and keep using it like normal. So one of the reasons I really love having the dog holes on the top is to clamp stuff down. So you can pick up these different kind of style clamps from Festool or Micro Jig, and the nice thing is you can drop these in any of these dog holes around the table, and you drop them down and clamp down your piece. These are super handy to have to hold pieces down when you're doing, biscuits or dominoes, or you're routing an edge or something like that. These are super nice to hold your work down to the table. So one of the downsides of these clamps that I was just showing you is they don't fit in the T-track on the 1" by 2" T-track that McMaster sells. So you can't really use them to like clamp stuff to the face of the table, which for me isn't a huge deal. I was planning on making a face vise for this thing anyway, and if you're just using it as an assembly, an Outfeed table, and you have another workbench, then it's probably not a big deal either. Just keep that in mind. So another thing I really like about this design is the aluminum rails that go along the outside of the assembly table, and that just gives you a lot of possibilities in the future when coming up with different jigs and things for your assembly table. So I'm excited to have it in the shop and just have the ability to make different jigs and different things for this table, and hopefully I'll make some videos on those as well as I come out with those. So during the video you also saw me talk about how I ended up just drawing a grid and drilling these dog holes, and so they weren't perfectly 90 degrees. But if you do want these holes perfectly 90, if you're going to be using this as like a way to cut using a track saw to do wide cross cuts on panels and stuff like that, I would just recommend you get your MDF top cut at like a makerspace or a CNC shop on a big CNC machine, and you can get your dog holes perfectly aligned in a grid pattern that way. Alright, so if you want to make one of these yourselves, I'll have links to the aluminum T-slot rails you can get on McMaster, and some of the nuts and bolts that I use that you can get on McMaster. And the nice thing about that is McMaster has tons of different sizes, so if you wanted to make a different size table, my table is 3 feet by 4 feet, but you can make one that's 2 feet by 4 feet or 4 foot by 8 foot. The only other thing that you'll need besides those are this MDF top, where you can just pick up a piece of MDF at the big box store or wherever you get your MDF. And then you also need the 3D printed corner brackets. If you have your own 3D printer, or if you know somebody with a 3D printer, I'll have a link where you can go get the STL files and print these out yourself. Or if you don't have a 3D printer, I will be offering these for sale, so you can go to, I'll put a link to where you can buy these, and I'll be 3D printing them here in my shop, and I'll ship them out to you. So that will be in the description below. And that should cover everything you need for the top of the assembly table. For the bottom base cabinet, I didn't make any plans or anything, so I did some rough plans to kind of get dimensions, but if you're really interested in these plans, let me know and maybe I can put those up as well. Anyway, hope you like this video and this build, and I'd love to see if you do end up building one. Let me know. I want to see some pictures of it in your shop. That'd be really cool. And also let me know if you have any ideas for different jigs or fixtures you'd like to see me make for this, using either the dog holes on the top or the aluminum rails on the side. I think there's a lot of different options, and possibilities there. So I'm just brainstorming more ideas to use this table for. So, alright, well I think that will do it for this video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.